Shalom and warm greetings to our Israel Vision viewing audience. In our studios here in the beautiful Mount Zion Hotel overlooking the ancient city of Jerusalem. I'm your host, Dr. Jay Rawlings.
And I'm Maridel Rawlings.
And today on our People Who Make a Difference portion is Professor Avner Vengosh, who's a senior lecturer of geochemistry and isotope hydrology at the Ben Gurion University of the Negev. Dr. Vengosh has published many articles in international scientific journals on his research that involves locating the sources and the mechanisms of water pollution the world over. In fact, his studies have taken him to Australia, Tuscany, Italy, Turkey, Canada, and the Salinas Valley in California. But during the last year, he's been involved in establishing a research collaboration with Palestinian and Jordanian colleagues that are addressing the issues of salinity along the Jordan River Valley and in the Gaza Strip, where they're dealing with the serious issues of water pollution in the Middle East in spite of the political tensions in the international level. Dr. Vengosh, it's a real joy to have you with us today, and thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Have you met your counterpart in these other nations?
Of course, we are working very extensively together, both from Jordan and from the Palestinian Authority, and we're trying to meet as often as we can and work together on the different issues.
And do you go to each other's area to work or just come to Israel?
Well, no, we travel to Jordan often, and we also, in the West Bank, we meet in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem. And before the Intifada, we used to meet in the West Bank itself, but after 2000, we meet in East Jerusalem and also meet overseas.
And are you encouraged with your work?
Sure. I mean,
you're not discouraged.
Yes, I mean,
you can see where you're going.
Yeah, we have fascinating results of our research. Our studies are quite amazing, and we are very encouraged for working together and putting aside all the burden of what's in the area, and we focus on science.
If I could ask you a question and maybe just tell our viewing audience something that I've learned so that it will help everybody. I've learned that we have three main sources of water in Israel. That's of course, the Sea of Galilee, which is a big reservoir where water comes down from the Golan Heights. Then there's the aquifers in the mountainous region of Israel. And then there's the number 3 source is the aquifers along the coast.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yes. Did I get a good grade on that?
You're fine.
Now, what kind of research do you actually do in these areas, especially on the coastal plain?
Okay, in the coastal plain, we looked into the situation in the southern part of the coastal plain in the Gaza Strip. This is a project that was financed by the European Union, and we took together with French and Italian and Greek scientists. And what we did, we looked at different levels on the sources of the salinity and nitrate pollution in the Gaza Strip, and also on the other side, in the Israeli border.
So that's like salt water that comes in from the Mediterranean, is that correct?
No, we found, that was the major hypothesis. People thought that this is the source of the salinity. What we found that, in fact, the salinity is inland. The salinity is, it's natural salinity. It's not human-induced, what we call anthropogenic salinity. It's natural salinity that's derived from water-rock interaction, and it's the saline water flow from Israel into the Gaza Strip. It's a natural flow, and because of over-pumping within the Gaza Strip, this flow of saline water has been increased for the last 30, 50 years, and therefore the salinity within the Gaza Strip has been increased significantly. So what we did in our project, first we looked at the scientific aspect to identify this saline water, and indeed to find out that it's derived from natural resources and not human-induced salinity sources. Then we build a numerical modeling that trying to understand and build in the computer how those saline water flow from Israel into the Gaza Strip. And then we build a water management plan that we try to understand how we can stop this salinization phenomena. And the idea is very simple. If we pump the saline water just before they arrive to the Gaza Strip, and you use this saline water for desalinization, we gain 2 points. First, we stop the salinization within the Gaza Strip. And second, we provide the people in the Gaza fresh water, much highly quality water than they're using right now. At the moment, the water quality in Gaza is the worst in the world, you can say, because the water quality is not following any international standard. And we believe it's a matter of time when this water crisis will going to be a really ecological disaster within the Gaza Strip, because people don't drink adequate water. And the salinity is much higher than any standard. The nitrate level is very high. And I think people don't do much research on the health consequences for that because of the situation right now.
So my question is, how can Israel afford, that doesn't have a lot of water extra itself, to pump water into the Gaza area to reduce the salinity?
Our plan is a win-win situation because we think Israel has nothing to lose. In fact, having happy neighbors, it's much more important than losing saline water that Israel is not using at all. So the idea is to build this line of water, of desalinization plant that can be also funded by the international community, not necessarily by Israel, and use this saline water for desalinization, provide the desalted water for the people in Gaza, improve significantly their drinking water.
Where is it coming from?
It's coming from in the territory within Israel, flowing into the Gaza Strip. That's what I mentioned. This is the natural underground natural flow of groundwater. I mean, the Middle East, everywhere you go in the Middle East, the problem of salinity is there.
Yes.
And when you have 1.2 million people over a very small land like the Gaza Strip, the salinity problem becoming much more emphasized or much more focused. And that's what we are being revealed in the last couple of years.
Now, we were also informed, we went on a tour down into the Negev, and the scientists down there are genetically engineering the plants that they can take salinated water now, use that water and produce the best fruit and vegetable that we've seen. Is that possible to give that same technology to the Gaza?
That's correct. I mean, when you're talking about desalinization, there are basically two options. One is to desalting seawater, that's what they're doing. In fact, Israel is doing it in Ashkelon.
And Eilat also?
And Eilat. Eilat is the major source of water, is from desalinization of seawater. But this is very costly and very advanced technology involved in establishing and building those plants. The other alternative is using brackish or saline water, like in the Negev or the one we suggest in the Gaza Strip for desalinization. And that has the advantage that it's relatively cheap and the operating is relatively easy.
So actually in the Middle East, well, anywhere in the world, but especially the Middle East, the arid Middle East, water sources is more important perhaps than political machinations or anything, isn't it? It's really the vital source of life.
That was what was one of our motivation to work together with our Palestinian and Jordanian colleagues, because at the end of the day, when all the political issues going to be resolved one way or to the other, it could be next decade, several decades, the people will be here and have to deal with the physical and the water issues that are here in the region. And unfortunately, the water resources that we are having in the Middle East are diminishing. One of the major resources that people have looked before is fossil water. It's water that their age is 30,000 years. They're being recharged into the aquifer during geological time, even before the Bible time. We're talking about water that being the rainwater that come into the aquifer several thousands, and there are some dispute about the correct age, but definitely it's old and it's not modern, and it's more than several thousands of years. Now, this groundwater in the Negev, for example, they are not very highly fresh water. It's saline water or brackish water. In Jordan or Egypt, this kind of water is highly fresh. It's highly quality water. So this water has been used as the target for future water in the Middle East using fossil water. In fact, in Libya, all the future of Libya lies on this sort of groundwater. Now, there are 2 points if we looked into this. One, we're talking about fossil water. So we actually mining the water. There's no renewable water resource. So the next generation probably will lack this water because the water are not renewable.
Priceless.
Exactly. And the second point is that now in a current study that we're doing in the Negev, we're finding that this type of water are highly radioactive.
Really?
It's a natural radioactivity. It's nothing to do with any human influence, but it's natural radioactivity due to water-rock interaction with the natural rocks. And this high radioactivity can be a serious factor on limiting the use of this water. Of course, you can treat it, again, using reverse osmosis desalinization. So you can treat this water, but it will going to cost more.
Expensive.
Yes.
I have just a question. The prophet Ezekiel had a vision of the Dead Sea being a sea of life, with fishermen casting their nets on the shores, etc., etc.
Okay.
All right, what does your scientific mind do with that?
Okay. There is a serious plans now, what we call the Red Sea, Dead Sea Canal, of bringing water from the Red Sea into the Dead Sea in order to stop the decline of the Dead Sea. I don't know if you're aware of it. The Dead Sea is being declined 1 meter a year. That's the rate.
It's enormous.
Of the Dead Sea decline. And it's basically because we take, Israelis, Jordanians, basically take the fresh water that are naturally flowing into the Dead Sea. The Jordan River is not the mighty Jordan River that used to be during the Bible time. So the Dead Sea is being shrinking. Now, the plan to stop this shrinking and bringing seawater into the Dead Sea has also implication for desalinization again. The idea is to use seawater as a source for desalinization, use the elevation difference between sea level and the Dead Sea, which is about minus 400 meters below sea level, and to use this difference as energy derived source for desalinization, and again using the desalted water for people in the region. But the outcome of bringing seawater into the Sea of Galilee will be changing the ecology.
Or into the Dead Sea.
Sorry, to the Dead Sea.
Yes.
Changing the ecology and the chemical composition of the Dead Sea. It's going to bring, the seawater has a lot of different dissolved components like sulfate. The Dead Sea have other dissolved components like calcium. The combination of calcium and sulfate is gypsum. So basically, we predict that bringing the seawater into the Dead Sea going to bring
cement.
Well, not cement, but whitening. The Dead Sea is going to be very whitening, and this could be a very bad news for the salt and the potash industry, both the Israeli and the Jordanian, because this is going to damage all the pumping, all the infrastructure. Infrastructure going to have.
So where is the authority that can make the final decision on that?
Well, I think that's going to be in the political arena rather than the scientific, because some scientific people now understanding this issue and trying to have simulation of what happens if you bring seawater into the Dead Sea. Another point is when you bring a high level of, if you bring the life of the seawater into the Dead Sea, you may have enormous amount of algae blooms into the Dead Sea. So, and that's have maybe not so life, but not so nice life consequences for this thing. So people are being testing what are the consequences for such a move, and the results are, yes, you're going to have desalted water. Yes, the sea level going to rise. But the water composition, as we know, of the Dead Sea is going to change completely.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vengosh. You are like an academic diplomat in the Middle East here. Thank you for your work.
Well, for those of you who don't understand everything that he said, but who do read the Bible, the prophets had a lot to say about water. Tremendous conflict in this area, even back then, over water, as there is today, but we have gentlemen like this who are making a difference. And we do read about Ezekiel's vision of the Dead Sea one day being a sea of life. And so that's what we wait for and look for. And so we close, leaving you with a blessing from this wonderful city of Jerusalem, perfect peace, which is simply Shalom, Shalom,
from Jerusalem. Shalom, I'm Dr. Jay Rawlings reporting to you from Jerusalem. In this week's Fact or Fantasy, I want to continue on looking at what are some of the issues that we need to know in our understanding of the Middle East conflict, and why the news media coverage is often shallow and without perspective and fails to give the overall picture. Well, this week we're carrying on with the vision of a rebuilt Israel. The fantasy was that the Jews had forever lost their connection to the land. In fact, I asked the Mufti of Jerusalem if the Jews could coexist and live together here in the land of promise. And here is his response.
We Muslims did not stand against the Jewish temples, neither the first nor the second. The first was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the second by the Roman general Titus. Muslims had nothing to do with the destruction of the Jewish temples. However, today, by the will of Allah, regarding Al-Aqsa Mosque and Haram al-Sharif, there is no place for other religions, neither for Jews nor Christians to have places of worship. It is only for Muslims. We respect other religions, we're not against others. But Al-Quds is an Islamic city religiously, politically, and culturally. It must be under Muslim authority. This logic agrees with culture, history, and religion. It has been an Arab city since its foundation 5,000 years ago. It belonged to the Arab Canaanites and the Arab Jebusites. The Arab Jebusites first built the city and gave it the name Salem. From that time until the present, the Arab character of Al-Quds has prevailed, as it has in all Palestine. The Islamic conquest gave Al-Quds its final Arab and Islamic character and heritage.
Well, according to this thinking, the Jews should not be back in the land of promise at all. And despite their devastation of the Second Jewish Temple and the centuries of exile which followed, the Jews have never lost their connection with the land. They kept the faith that they would eventually return. And in spite of their enemies' effort to erase the Jewish bond with the land, the Romans, for example, changed the name of the country from Judea to Palestina. And that's where the Palestinians get their name from today. It was simply a man-made, non-biblical name applied to Judea, where everyone living in the area, Arab and Jew alike, were called Palestinians. It did not define a specific ethnic people. Then only small numbers of Jews continued to live in scattered locations in Palestina, such as Jerusalem, Tiberias, and Safed. But it was not only this physical presence that maintained the Jewish connection to the land, but it was also their Jewish religious practice. Their prayers to return to the land have been prayed over these last 2 millennia, and God has certainly answered these prayers in quite dramatic ways. The Jews, when they were scattered around the world, frequently made the hazardous journey from abroad to settle back in the land according to their biblical instructions. And the great rabbinical leaders such as Maimonides, who came from Spain in the 13th century, was one of these that came back. And Israel was always seen as even during these bleakest periods of Jewish persecution, as the place in which Jews would eventually gather to reestablish their country and in due course herald a messianic age of universal peace and high moral values. See you next week on Fact or Fantasy.
I'm Meridale Rawlings to bring you his still small voice from this beautiful garden in the hills of Benjamin just outside the city of Jerusalem. Let's talk about confusion and gentleness. The Bible says that where there is confusion, there is every evil thing. And I find that there's so much confusion sexually in the world today, and it seems to be growing more and more. I know that in Canada now we have the same-sex marriages, and we have a tremendous stirring all over the earth. People wondering just who they are and how they're to respond in life. We're brought up to enjoy wrestling and car racing and football and these really macho soccer games and all this masculinity that is really tough stuff. But what if you're a gentle person? Does that make you effeminate? Absolutely not. But there's a confusion because we think if we're not big tough guys and we are gentle of heart and spirit, that there's something wrong with us. Not at all. Gentleness is an art that has been lost. In your whole life, how many truly gentle souls have you met? People in whose presence you feel, oh, I'm just me, and being just you is completely acceptable. So often we're just not acceptable to ourselves first and to those around us. We always are expected to change and be something else. But I want to talk again. Let's talk about gentleness. What is gentleness? Gentleness is the ability to be kind in the most miserable circumstances. Gentleness is the ability to listen to people harangue you, but not to take it personally. Not to feel you have to always respond and fight for your right, but not to be diminished either. Gentleness is an extremely strong quality because a gentle person has been firmly built from within, from the foundations up. You might say they have a layer of steel between them and you. Oh, they're gentle, all right, but the negativity of the world around them isn't entering into their spirit or into their mind to weaken them, to make them become what they see and to act like those who are around them. I remember once I was with a relative of mine who was very caustic, very sarcastic, and very mean. This hurts. And I was devastated. And I remember thinking, I have got to get to Margaret Woodcock. Margaret Woodcock was 100 years old, and she was losing her eyesight. But when she saw me come in and she saw my emotional state, she took me into her arms and she crushed me to her bosom, and she put her hand on my head and she said, oh, I'm going to pray for you. She could see that I was devastated by what had happened to me. But the gentleness in Margaret reached out and enfolded and embraced and washed and was used to heal my broken spirit. There's a wonderful word in the Torah that says, thy gentleness has made me great. What does that mean? Think about it. Take a few minutes alone in a garden, in a park. Think about gentleness and the heart of God for you. If you have questions, log on to hisstillsmallvoice.com. See you there.